When I think about my life, the word perfect often comes up. Not because it's true, but because that's how everyone else seems to see it. I'm Mark, 31 years old, a business co-owner, and the product of what some might call an ideal family. My father remarried when I was barely a thought in his mind. Before that, he'd been married to Ryan's mom, though that didn't last long. Ryan was just 8 months old when they split, but my father kept them close. He's the kind of man who believes loyalty is a badge of honor, even when it makes things complicated. 2 years after the divorce, he met my mother. She was sharp, ambitious, and determined to create the family she'd always dreamed of. By the time I was born, Ryan was already part of the package deal, and my father's efforts to keep everyone happy meant weaving a web of expectations no one could ever meet. On the outside, we looked picture perfect. Christmas cards with matching sweaters, family dinners where everyone smiled, and vacations that seemed like postcards. But underneath, there were cracks that no one dared to acknowledge. Growing up, Ryan and I were never close. We didn't fight outright, but there was always this silent competition. My father made it clear that we were both expected to be exceptional. Him as the older son, me as the younger one trying to catch up. Ryan was good at sports. I was better at academics. He got the praise for his charm. I got it for my discipline. It sounds like a balanced equation, but the truth is, it left little room for anything genuine between us. Ryan's mother, who had never really liked my mom, only added fuel to the fire. She'd make sly comments during family gatherings, things meant to sting but subtle enough to go unnoticed by anyone who wasn't paying attention. My mom, in turn, would tighten her grip on the image of our perfect family. It became exhausting, but I learned early on that the only way to survive was to play my part and play it well. By the time I hit my 20s, I had a plan: go to a top-tier university, graduate with honors, and build a career that would make my parents proud. And I did it. I co-founded a company with my best friend, and it took off faster than we could have imagined. But the more success I achieved, the more I realized it wasn't for me. It was for them, for the people who'd spent my entire life shaping me into the man they wanted me to be. Still, I kept going, because what else was there to do? Then came Emily. She was a breath of fresh air, the kind of person who walked into a room and made it lighter. We met at a networking event, which sounds as unromantic as it gets, but there was something about her that drew me in. She wasn't perfect, not in the way my family would define it. She loved surface-level things, designer handbags, perfectly filtered Instagram posts, and gossip about people we'd never met. But beneath that, she was kind and gentle. I thought she was what I needed, someone to balance out the pressure, someone to make life feel a little less heavy. We dated for 3 years and moved in together after the first. It wasn't always smooth, but I chalked up our arguments to normal relationship stuff. Everyone fights, right? I had this vision of us, a house, kids, a life that was ours, not shaped by anyone else. So I decided to propose. It seemed like the logical next step, the thing that would make everything feel solid and real. I planned to do it on my birthday. It felt symbolic, a new chapter for me and for us. My parents were hosting a party, a big one as usual, with family and friends filling every corner of the house. I'd arranged for a private moment after the cake, just the two of us. The ring was in my pocket, and I could feel its weight with every step I took. As the night wore on, I felt a strange mix of excitement and nerves. Everyone was laughing, drinking, celebrating me. The perfect son, the successful businessman, the man about to take the next big step in life. But there was something in the air I couldn't quite put my finger on. A tension, maybe. Or maybe it was just my imagination. When the time came, I pulled Emily aside. The words were forming in my mind, the speech I'd rehearsed 100 times. Despite the fleeting look on her face, I decided to push through, hoping it was just nerves. I got down on one knee, held out the ring, and asked her to marry me. For a moment she froze, and I thought my heart might stop. Then she smiled, nodded, and said yes. Relief and joy washed over me. Even though that strange tension lingered in the back of my mind, a shadow I couldn't quite shake. 3 months after the wedding, life had settled into a routine. At least, that's what I told myself. Between work and the usual grind, there wasn't much time to think about anything else. Emily and I were still figuring out the rhythms of married life, and while it wasn't perfect, I thought we were happy. Or maybe I wanted to believe that we were. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. Emily wasn't around, which wasn't unusual given her social nature. I went to toss my suit jacket in the laundry when something caught my attention. It was a phone tucked into the pocket of her jeans, left on the chair by the bed. At first, I thought it was her usual one, but when I picked it up, I noticed the case was different. Plain, no decorations. Not like Emily at all. The phone screen lit up as I tapped it, revealing no passcode. That struck me as odd. Emily was meticulous about securing her things. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the messaging app. There was only one conversation thread. The name at the top made my stomach drop. Ryan, my brother. The messages weren't ancient history. They dated back months, overlapping with the days leading up to our wedding. My hands trembled as I scrolled through them. Each text was a knife, cutting deeper and deeper. They talked about meeting in secret, about the thrill of sneaking around. One message mentioned the day of our engagement party. While I had been surrounded by family and friends, ready to propose to Emily, she had been kissing Ryan in the backyard. I felt sick. The messages outlined a plan, one so calculated it left me breathless. They had agreed to keep their relationship quiet, at least for now. 3 years, one of the messages read. That's how long they intended to keep up appearances, pretending to be the loyal spouses while they figured out how to make their own future work. The audacity of it was staggering. I kept scrolling, desperate to understand how this could have happened. Ryan had always been charming, the golden boy who could do no wrong. But I never thought he was capable of something so cruel. He'd been at our wedding, smiling for the photos, toasting to our future. And Emily? She had looked radiant that day, the picture of a happy bride. It was all a lie. Unable to read further, I took screenshots of the messages. My mind raced, emotions swirling between anger, betrayal, and disbelief. I put the phone back exactly where I found it and walked out of the room. I needed space to think, to breathe. I grabbed an overnight bag, threw in some essentials, and left the house without a word. The weight of what I had discovered was too much to process in that moment. I checked into a nearby hotel, my thoughts spiraling. How could they do this to me? Ryan, the brother I had tried so hard to connect with despite our differences. Emily, the woman I had trusted with my heart, my future. Every memory I had of them now felt tainted, warped by the knowledge of their betrayal. Lying in the sterile hotel room, I couldn't stop replaying the past few months in my head. The signs I'd missed, the moments that now seemed so obvious in hindsight. I thought about Ryan's easy charm, how he always managed to get what he wanted. I thought about Emily's quiet hesitations, the fleeting moments when she seemed distant. And I thought about myself, the fool who had believed in a facade so carefully constructed it had blinded me to the truth. The worst part was knowing that I couldn't undo what had happened. The betrayal was done, the damage irreparable. All I could do now was decide how to move forward. But as I stared at the ceiling, anger began to replace the numbness. Ryan had always been the star, the one everyone adored. And now, he had taken the one thing that mattered most to me. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. I hadn't spoken to Emily since I left the house. She'd called a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. It felt like every vibration of my phone was another reminder of what she and Ryan had done. Eventually, I picked up when her name flashed on the screen, more out of frustration than anything else. Her voice sounded shaky, as if she knew how close she was to losing everything. When she asked where I was, I cut her off, telling her I knew everything. I told her not to call me again. For a while, there was silence. It wasn't the calm kind, but the type that felt heavy, like a storm brewing in the distance. Then, as if on cue, my father called. I hadn't expected it, but I wasn't surprised either. He had always been the one to smooth things over, to make sure the family's image remained untarnished. At first, his voice was calm, even soothing. He asked how I was, tried to ease into the conversation, but I wasn't in the mood for small talk. Soon enough, he got to the point. He knew about Ryan and Emily. My father, ever the peacemaker, had taken on the task of convincing me to stay silent. Not for my sake, of course, but for the family's. He talked about Sarah, Ryan's wife, and how she didn't deserve to have her life turned upside down. He even mentioned Ryan's child, as if that should make me forget the betrayal. It was all about avoiding a scandal, preserving the perfect image we'd spent years crafting. His words felt like another betrayal, as if my pain didn't matter. It was all about Ryan, about protecting him from the consequences of his actions. My father spoke about family unity, but it was clear who he thought was worth protecting. He kept going, telling me Ryan was scared of losing custody of his kid, that he'd made a mistake and deserved a chance to fix it. I didn't say much. I just listened, letting him dig deeper into his web of excuses. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I recorded the call. I knew it wasn't exactly noble, but I needed proof. Proof that my family was willing to sweep my pain under the rug to save Ryan's reputation. By the time the call ended, I felt more disconnected from them than ever. Sitting in that hotel room, I stared at the screenshots on my phone. I thought about Sarah, about how she deserved to know the truth. She had a right to make her own decisions, just like I did. I'd spent my life trying to be the good son, the one who kept things together. But this time, I couldn't play that role. I sent her the screenshots along with a message explaining everything. It was short and to the point. She needed to see the truth for herself. When I hit send, a wave of relief washed over me. It didn't make the pain go away, but it felt like I was finally taking control of a situation that had spiraled beyond my grasp. I turned off my phone, knowing the fallout would come soon enough. My father would be furious, Ryan would be desperate, and Emily, well, I didn't care what she thought anymore. As I sat there in the quiet, I realized this wasn't just about their betrayal. It was about breaking free from the weight of my family's expectations, from the need to keep up appearances at the cost of my own happiness. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to the way things were. When Sarah saw the screenshots, her reaction was immediate. She didn't waste time asking for explanations or giving Ryan a chance to talk his way out of it. She packed a bag for herself and their son that same day and moved back in with her parents. For Sarah, there was no hesitation. She filed for divorce within the week, leaving Ryan scrambling to hold on to the life he'd so carelessly jeopardized. Watching it unfold from the sidelines, I couldn't help but feel a mix of vindication and sadness. Her decisiveness reminded me of what I wished I'd done earlier in my own life. Choose myself over the facade of a perfect family. But the fallout didn't stop there. My family, predictably, shifted their focus from Ryan's actions to mine. My mother called me first, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disappointment. She accused me of overreacting, of destroying the harmony we had all worked so hard to maintain. She didn't ask how I was or what I needed. She only cared about the image we'd shattered. It became clear to me that in their eyes, keeping the family intact, no matter how toxic, was more important than addressing the betrayal that had caused its collapse. The calls from other relatives started soon after. Each one carried the same undertone of blame. How could I have exposed Ryan like that? Didn't I understand the damage it would do to everyone else? It was as if they'd all agreed to rewrite the narrative, turning me into the villain for refusing to stay silent. The weight of their expectations, which I'd carried for so long, began to feel unbearable. But this time, I refused to give in. The breaking point came when Ryan and my father showed up at the hotel where I was staying. They must have gotten the address from someone in the family, though I couldn't bring myself to care who it was. Ryan's face was pale, his usual charm replaced with desperation. My father, on the other hand, looked every bit the composed negotiator he'd always been. Together, they laid out their plan. I would help Ryan in court discredit Sarah and ensure he retained custody of his son. They spoke as if it were a given, as if my participation was a duty I couldn't refuse. I let them talk. I let them list every reason why I should comply, every guilt-laden argument about family loyalty and second chances. And then I stood up, grabbed my room key, and called hotel security. Watching them get escorted out was strangely cathartic. For the first time, I felt like I'd drawn a line they couldn't cross. It didn't matter what they thought of me anymore. I was done playing their games. Later that night, Emily's name popped up on my phone. I almost didn't read the message, but curiosity got the better of me. She claimed she'd ended things with Ryan, said he'd never taken her seriously, and that she realized she'd made a mistake. Her words felt hollow, a weak attempt at salvaging something that was already broken beyond repair. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. As I sat in the quiet of my hotel room, I thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The family I'd grown up with, the people I'd once trusted, were now strangers to me. But for the first time, I felt free. Free from their expectations, their manipulations, their endless cycle of preserving appearances. It wasn't an easy freedom, but it was mine. And for now, that was enough. The divorce with Emily was quicker than I anticipated. To my surprise, she didn't fight for alimony or try to claim any of my assets. Maybe she thought it was her way of making amends, or maybe she just wanted to close this chapter as much as I did. Whatever the reason, I didn't question it. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could see the beginnings of a future that wasn't shackled to betrayal and lies. While my process ended smoothly, Ryan and Sarah's divorce was a different story. It was messy and drawn out, with accusations flying back and forth. Ryan's attempt to gain custody of their son only fueled the tension. Sarah, however, held her ground. She was fierce, determined to protect her son from the chaos Ryan had created. Throughout it all, she kept in touch with me. She thanked me for telling her the truth. It seemed like she was relieved to finally have clarity, and I could see her determination to move forward despite everything. In the quiet that followed the storm, I found myself reflecting on what had happened. It was hard not to replay the events in my mind, to pick apart the choices that led me here. But instead of dwelling on the pain, I tried to focus on what I'd learned. For years, I'd been living for other people, for my family's approval, for the image of success they wanted me to maintain. Emily and Ryan's betrayal had shattered that illusion, and as much as it hurt, it also freed me. I'd lost people who didn't value me, and in doing so, I'd gained something far more important: clarity. One evening, I stood in the empty living room of my house. It was mine now, fully and completely. The silence was different this time. It wasn't heavy or foreboding. It was peaceful. I looked around and saw not just the remnants of a life I'd left behind, but the potential for something new. The walls didn't feel like they were closing in anymore. They felt like a blank canvas. I started making plans, small steps toward rebuilding. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into work, and even picked up hobbies I'd long abandoned. For the first time in years, I was living for myself, and it felt good. There were moments when the past would creep in, when the anger or sadness threatened to pull me under, but I reminded myself that those feelings were temporary. What mattered was how I moved forward. As I stood at the threshold of my new beginning, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude, not for the pain or the betrayal, but for the clarity it brought. It was a harsh lesson, one I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it taught me to value myself in a way I never had before. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, It felt like it was truly mine to walk.